A father set out one day to teach his young daughter a powerful lesson. When she woke up in the morning, he took her in front of a mirror and asked her, "What do you see?" She smiled and answered, "I see myself." He then took her to the window and asked her, "What do you see now?" "I see houses and trees and grass and a whole world outside," she said, this time with a sense of wonder and joy in her voice. And that night, before tucking his daughter into bed, the father again brought her to the mirror and asked her, "What do you see?" "I still see myself," she answered, a bit confused as to why they were doing this again. But he then took her back to the window. "What do you see now?" he asked. "I see me," she answered, suddenly very confused. Did the window turn into a mirror? Be patient, stay focused, and keep on staring at the window. What do you see? After a long silent moment, her eyes lit up. "I finally see it. I see houses and trees and the world outside." Her father smiled and explained to his daughter, "Sometimes we get so caught up in our own lives that we think everything in life revolves around us. Instead of seeing the true nature of things, we see everything as a mirror of ourselves. As a result, we project our views onto everything we see and everything we hear. Instead, we each need to learn how to peer past the surface, past ourselves, and see the endless beauty, wisdom, and depth that lies beneath the surface. Because when we do so, we turn the mirror into a window, revealing a world of depth behind it." Now, before we talk about this week's Parshas Beha'aloscha, I want you to imagine a life beyond the one you currently experience. One with new senses and sensations, new colors added to your field of vision, new sounds to your range of hearing. What if you had abilities that far surpassed anything you can imagine? Consider a reality in which you had access to all wisdom and could experience and grasp it all instantaneously. It's so difficult to imagine this because it's nearly impossible to think about something that you've never experienced before. Just try thinking of a color that doesn't exist. But this is actually related to Moshes Prophecy. The Rambam in Perek Chilek famously formulates 13 principles of faith, which he believes is to be the absolute foundational pillars of Jewish belief, emphasizing that every Jew has to believe in these principles. And the 6th principle states that all of the words of the Nevi'im, the prophets, are true. The 7th principle specifies that the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu is true, and that he was the greatest Navi of all time, greater than both those that came before him and those that came after. Now, the 6th principle is obviously crucial. The 7th seems redundant. I mean, if all of the Nevi'im's words were true, then of course Moshe's were true as well. So what's so fundamentally important about the superiority of Moshe's prophecy that the Rambam deemed it necessary to state it as a separate principle of faith? And more broadly, what does it mean that Moshe was the greatest prophet to ever live? In Parshas Beha'aloscha, Hashem himself attests to the greatness of Moshe and his unique level of prophecy. So what was so unique about Moshe's prophecy? We know that Moshe received the Torah from Hashem and brought it down to the Jewish people, a role that he seemed uniquely suited for because the Torah itself is even called Torah's Moshe, indicating an intrinsic tie between Moshe and the Torah. But what was the greatness of Moshe's prophecy that earned him this unique status? Why was Moshe's nevuah fundamentally different from all the other Nevi'im who came before and after him? So to understand Moshe's prophecy, we have to first develop an understanding of nevuah in general. But it is important to note that we live in a world devoid of prophecy. Therefore, attempting to understand it is like trying to understand a human sense by hearing someone describe it to you. However powerfully you can describe sight, it won't mean much to a person who's been blind from birth. And likewise, a deaf person could read about hearing, but he has no past experience or mental framework in which to place it. And similarly, in a world devoid of prophecy, it becomes exceedingly difficult to understand or even relate to the experience. However, we'll try to paint a picture as clear as possible. The basic consensus is that a prophet has to be a great tzaddik, spending his or her entire life building to the stage where he's worthy of receiving prophecy. And this includes both a mastery of Torah knowledge and commitment to its observance, as well as complete command over one's midos, their character traits, and their intellect. And once he achieves this exalted status, he's capable of receiving prophecy, and Hashem will choose whether or not to grant him prophecy. The prophetic experience itself was an otherworldly, transcendent experience. Hashem opened and expanded the Navi's consciousness, allowing him to connect to a higher dimension of existence, one that lies far beyond the limitations of time and space, far beyond the capacity of the regular human mind. And in doing so, the Navi becomes capable of experiencing lofty ideas and intellectual truths which he would otherwise have no access to. And these ideas and truths would then filter down through the Navi's intellect and get translated by his imaginative faculties, resulting in his unique subjective experience of these lofty objective truths. In a very deep sense, Nevuah was a transcendent, angelic experience of the spiritual world that a Navi experienced while still in this world. And building off this general understanding of prophecy, we have to ask, what made Moshes Prophecy unique? The most unique characteristic of Moshes Prophecy was his level of clarity. The Gemara explains that while all other prophets saw through a clouded lens, Moshe saw through a clear lens. We all perceive reality through our own unique lens, and a tremendously developed and wise person will see the world through a much more sophisticated lens than an immature child. One of them sees many layers of depth behind every aspect of reality, while the other sees nothing more than the surface. One of them looks at the Torah and sees layers of wisdom, while the other looks at the same words and sees meaningless scribbles. And as the child matures, he'll have the ability to expand his understanding and develop a more sophisticated approach to life. And the same is true regarding prophecy. There were many different levels. As humans, our consciousness is limited in that we only see the physical, not the spiritual. And since prophecy is a window into the spiritual, the metaphor Chazal used to describe the quality of the Navi's vision is an aspeclaria, loosely translated as a window, lens, or mirror. The greater the prophet, the clearer his vision and the better his understanding. The lesser the prophet, the more opaque and cloudy his vision, and the more hazy his understanding. And while all other Nevi'im's vision had some measure of cloudiness, Moshe saw Hashem in the spiritual world with absolute clarity, or with as much clarity as possible for a human being. In other words, while the other Nevi'im saw a reflection of the spiritual world and its truths, Moshe saw the spiritual world itself with no filters. As Ramchal puts it in Derech Hashem, Moshe saw through a glass window. He saw the spiritual world as it is with absolute clarity. Moshe completely negated his ego. He was a transparent reflection of Hashem, and his nevuah was 100% pure. He experienced his prophecy without any translation, filtration, or distortion. He received it exactly as it was given by Hashem. In other words, all other Nevi'im saw an image of truth, but the words they transmitted were only a reflection of that truth, shaped by their own minds and personalities. Moshe, however, saw the objective truth, and was able to transmit that objective truth in its absolute purity and entirety. The words he wrote were the actual objective truth, not a filtered or watered-down reflection. Moshe added nothing of himself to Hashem's words. He was purely the medium and vessel through which Hashem gave the Torah. And that's what Chazal mean when they say, Shechina medaberes mitoch grono shel Moshe, that Hashem spoke through the throat of Moshe. Moshe wasn't speaking, Hashem was. Moshe simply gave over what Hashem said, as opposed to other Nevi'im who received prophecy from Hashem and then expressed it in their own unique way. And we can now explain why the Rambam separates between the 6th and 7th Ikar Emunah. The 6th Ikar is our belief in Nevuah itself, that prophecy is a message of spiritual truth from Hashem. Moshe's Nevuah, however, was not only true, but of a fundamentally different category. It was a revelation of absolute truth. One could have easily mistaken Moshe's Nevuah as being no different from any other Navis. And as a result, if a Navi claimed to receive a new Torah, perhaps he would be right, and perhaps it should replace Moshe's Torah. The Rambam is therefore clarifying that Moshe didn't just receive prophecy, he received the highest level of prophecy possible. And this level of prophecy is Torah. Every other Navi is on a lower level, and therefore if a Navi contradicts Moshe's Torah, we know he's a Navi Sheker, a false prophet. Now, to many, Moshe may not serve as a classic role model. He wasn't great, he was perfect. He didn't accomplish a lot, he accomplished everything. And to some, this may be more overwhelming than inspiring, more daunting than encouraging. But I believe that we can all connect to Moshe in a very deep way. Moshe shows us what humanity is capable of. Sometimes you need to see an example of human perfection before you can personalize that ideal to your unique mission in life. True, you can't be as great as Moshe, but that's not your job. Your job is to be the greatest version of you possible. But perhaps Moshe can inspire us to challenge ourselves a bit more, to add one more layer to our self-expectations, to question our own limits, to genuinely ask ourselves if we're giving it everything we have. Moshe was a complicated figure. When he separated from his wife Miriam and Aaron didn't understand or even agree with it. He wasn't a man of this world, but that wasn't his role. He serves as an eternal model of transcendent perfection, a star in the night sky guiding each of us on our own unique journey through life. And in moments of self-doubt, in moments of opportunity, in moments of fear, just think of Moshe and remember that in a very deep way, the sky is the limit. Or is it?